This is Dr. Joe Phillips, and this is the wonderful Sarasota Advisory Committee, and they've put in a long day, and they're looking forward to having a dialogue with you as well. This is a cross-section and wonderful representation of the county, and the format is we'll ask you to introduce yourself, tell them about your background, your experiences, and why you may be the best candidate for the position here, and then we'll go around the table and each one of them will ask a question. And we'll finish up with you summarizing. We have about an hour and a half at the most, so we're going to begin, and that doesn't mean we have to stick to an hour and a half, but it depends on the length of your answers and so on. So we'll start with you, and off we go.
Thank you. First, media folks, can you hear me okay with the mic and everything? Okay, just wanted to make sure. So first, I just want to say thank you so much for all of you being here today. This is one of the most important parts of a superintendent search. I've been right where you're sitting right now, and taking time out of what your life is in order to make sure that you get the best superintendent for Sarasota County Schools is absolutely essential, and it's absolutely amazing. Whether that candidate ends up being me or not, truly, and I'm not just saying this because I'm the last candidate to talk to you guys. I really mean it. So I just wanted to start with that. I'll go over my background. This is always kind of the uncomfortable talk yourself up part of any job interview. So I'll just go over it. So starting off with my career, 17 years old, I joined the United States Army as a enlisted soldier. So I was a field artillery guy. If you're familiar with field artillery, I was the guy that was calling in the artillery rounds, called a forward observer. Did that for a couple of years, and then I ended up in intelligence and counterintelligence, and then working in IT, and then the mobilization of National Guard and Reserve soldiers. So then became a non-commissioned officer, where I worked my way up to staff sergeant, and then in 2009 I was commissioned as a commissioned officer, where I got to do some amazing things. So as a commissioned officer, I worked as chief of staff, a commander, chief of HR, chief of IT, an executive officer. I coordinated and led operations on 4 continents and 4 different time zones throughout Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa, Egypt, Italy, Germany, and the United States on multiple coasts. And at that same time, had 2 businesses that I had successful exits from. So one was a bakery that my wife and I owned together. And she's sitting in the back over there, and she hates it when I say that she was on Cupcake Wars, but she was, and she did pretty good. So that was exciting. We ended up having a clean exit on that. And then the other company was a nationwide corporate housing company, putting up military personnel, traveling nurses, that kind of stuff. My plan, my life plan and my bucket list was to stay in the military until I retired, work my way up to general if I could make it to the general rank, and that was my goal. In Afghanistan in 2012, I ended up getting injured, and my life took a different twist. So I spent 2 years at Fort Riley, Kansas, going through physical therapy and surgeries, and I just could not get good enough for the Army to say, we're going to keep you in. So they ended up retiring me medically, and I had to find a new purpose for myself, and I found that purpose in education. I had a job lined up at the VA hospital where I was going to be the CIO for the VA hospital in Kansas City. And my wife said to me, how about this job in our kids' school district? And I said, yes, ma'am. So I applied. I ended up getting it. And I absolutely fell in love with education. But I found myself working in a whole new world, and I realized I really needed to understand the world that I'm in. And so I went and I got my doctorate in educational leadership. Through that school district, I was able to do some amazing things on the instructional side of the house. I was able to flip our learning, so flip our classrooms where content delivery was done at home, and actually driving down into project-based learning and other modalities and methods were used at school in the classroom with the kids. I was able to stand up a really cool school called LEAD that was really centered around project-based learning and leveraging summit learning. For that, I was able to completely transform our media centers and turn them into media centers with collaboration bays and rooms, and we were able to even put coffee shops in those media centers for our ESE students and our critical life skills students to be able to work at to get the skills that they needed. From there, I went to Kansas City Public Schools. That's the district that I grew up in, and the superintendent at the time, Mark Bedell, asked me to come back and help him turn the district around. So as a kind of turnaround specialist in the Army, I did a lot of turning units around, whether it was standing them up to solve problems like the soldiers who were going over to theater weren't getting the skills that they needed actually in theater. So we invented a program called Operation Warrior Trainer, where the folks coming back could be the trainers, training the new guys going over, but did a lot of that work. So came over and helped them turn Kansas City Public Schools around. So we were able to, within 18 months, score the highest that the district had scored in over 30 years. And by the time I left Kansas State Public Schools, we were able to regain state accreditation. We did an entire transformation of that district, every department, every division, every classroom, really changing how teaching and learning occurred inside of Kansas State Public Schools. We were able to regain that state accreditation. It works a little different in Missouri, where it's not Cognia that comes into credit, it's actually from the state, and they had not been accredited in decades, and we were able to earn that back. So then my wife said that it was time to move to Florida. So again, I said, yes, ma'am. And we moved to Florida, where I've been able to do some amazing work, to include being the CIO at Broward County Public Schools. And as a CIO, while I do oversee all the technology of the school district, my main function there is strategy and innovation. So I am in every department, every division, every classroom, really looking at how do we strategize and operationalize our strategy to make things actually happen, and then how do we innovate every area of the district. So whether that is our academics, our teaching and learning, whether that's safety and security, whether it's finance, whether it's transportation, our physical plant operations, I am literally, my days can never be predictable in what I get pulled in. I'm in the superintendent's office literally every day, working on strategy and innovation for the district. So with that leads me here to apply as your superintendent for Sarasota County Schools. So I think that covers my background, and I'm excited for any questions that you have.
All right. So I'm Sebastian Driscoll, and I'm going to be a junior next year here in Sarasota. So my question to you really just covers your experience as a CIO and the management skills. What we found out today, and as I know as a student from speaking with teachers and all that, is that a lot of our systems and processes in Sarasota are out of date. As a matter of fact, our interim that was here specified that as well, that a lot of them are out of date and they're not functioning as well as other districts have it. So how would you, with your experience in management and in CIO and technology, how would you be able to update these systems or bring in new systems to make sure that quality education can be delivered to every student?
Thank you. That's a great question. It's right in my wheelhouse, so I really like it. So for me, it's looking through a lens of digital transformation. And in order to get there, I have to look through what I call my 4 lenses approach. So with 4 lenses, I look at our systems, to include our IT systems, but also just our human systems. How does work happen within the district, or how do ideas turn into work that actually accomplishes things? I look at our structure, so how are we built? What's our organizational chart? I look at our culture, which is what do we believe and how do we treat each other? And then I look at the internal politics, not left-right politics, but internal. So when we talk about those politics, it's do we have good, healthy conflict at the table, but then once a decision's made, we all get behind it and we achieve together? Or are we all agreeing at the table, but then working against whatever the decision's made when we're away from the table? So I said all of that to say this. When we talk about systems inside of education, we look at a few things, and one of the things that we really have to see is that we are an educational ecosystem. And when we're talking about an ERP system, so enterprise resource and planning system, which is where our budget lives, which is how we do our procurement, which is where our finance lives, and our HR, if we have our human capital management system attached to that, the efficiencies that we can make there means we can put more resources towards instruction and in the classroom. When we make efficiencies to a student information system, we can now get safety and security, operations, finance, inside the classroom, ESE, all the departments seeing what they need to see about students all in the same place, but we're also able to automate different triggers off of certain things. So once a district has a robust student information system, you can start to throw things like predictive analytics against it. So you can look back at a student's record and say, okay, here's some supports that we're seeing down the road that this student might need, or here's some activity or behavior that we think a student might need behavioral threat assessment on, or some other things, and we can build and automate that stuff out. But in order to get to any of that, I have a process that I call PTAC, and that is planning, and the planning is our problem of practice through our proposed solution, then implementation, transition over to the end users, in this case, adoption. So we can see a problem, we think that a technology solution will fix it, then we buy it, then we try to implement that technology solution. And when we go to implement, that's where we can start to get pushback and that kind of stuff, so we have to work through that. But then we transition at some point in time from the project team over to the folks that are actually going to be using it. And if those folks weren't part of the that planning process, then it's not going to go very far past the transition phase. Then we buy something, we implement, and we've transitioned it over. And now we have to check on adoption. Is it actually being used, and is it solving the problem that we thought it was here to solve, that we went to solve it? If that answer is no, then why not? And what are we going to do about it? And that leads to the C, which is continuous improvement. So under continuous improvement, we look at plan, do, study, act. And so through the adoption piece, we do the study, and then we do the act part and say, okay, if not, why not? Are we off base or whatever? So honestly, looking at Sarasota County schools, there's a great need for some digital transformation to make sure that not just our processes, not just our operations, but also what's happening in the classroom is worthy of being in the 21st century, in my opinion. But the other thing that I just want to point out is the PTAC and these skills directly transfer over to any initiative that you're trying to accomplish. So you go through all of those stages with whatever it is that you're trying to bring into a school district. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, perfect.
Sure.
Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Cottrell. I'm a former parent and a mentor at Riverview High School. And again, as a spouse of a veteran, I say thank you for your service. I'm going to ask you the same question I've asked everybody else because it's near and dear to me. And that's regarding, a lot of it is regarding our ESC. There's a lot of talk about, as we've said before, pre-K through elementary, trying to keep the learning gap small, keep them on grade level. And there's a lot of talk about how they want to go about that, and that's fine. But I have a concern for those that are in middle school already, in high school. So your grades 6 through 12, who already have that learning gap, not reading on level, deficient in math skills. So if you were the superintendent of Sarasota County, how would you come in and evaluate those students, and what would you do to make sure that those students' achievement gaps were closed in?
Thank you. So the first thing that I would do is I have a little bit of a different philosophy than some other folks. So for me, it's not about every student, it's about each student. And the reason that is when you say every student, what I've seen in K-12 is you can get to a point to where folks feel like it's good enough. And I don't feel like it's good enough unless it's each student. Each student needs to have a hook and a plan. A hook is what gets them to school every day, that can get them to push through those issues that you just spoke of. My own son it has autism, dyslexia, and ADHD. Without his hooks that get him to school every day, he's not going to school every day. One of the biggest things that we fight with this kiddo is school phobia. He just wakes up and he's nauseous and doesn't feel good going there. But when he has his hook, his reason for being at school that day, and he has his plan of what he's going to do after he graduates, it can help overcome some of those things. So first is I would want to make sure that we are able to identify a hook and a plan for each student. The other thing that I would look at specifically with ESE students is make sure that we're not looking at them through a deficit lens. A lot of times the levers that you can pull for ESE students there's a lot of levers. And if you're looking at it through a deficit lens, you're not going to pull the right levers. When you're looking at it through the lens of every student can achieve wonderful things and reach their maximum potential, you end up pulling different levers in order to apply the proper accommodations for those students. The other thing that I believe strongly in is making sure that our parents are educated to understand the alphabet soup that comes along with being an ESE parent. We got very far into my own personal kids' educational experience before we realized what the alphabet soup actually meant. So just as an example for us, the school district kept telling us that blended literacy was going to work for our student. We didn't at the time even know what that meant. There was a lot of different accommodations, intensive reading, and all this other stuff that they kept trying to apply. And it wasn't until we learned how to educate ourselves and we got an advocate and we started to learn what the words meant that it's not going to work for our son. So empowering our parents to understand the process and understanding what all those words mean is very important. What we ended up doing is my wife quit her job at the time when my son was in 4th grade, and she taught herself all she learned, Orton Gillingham and Science of Reading, and she homeschooled him and got him from a kindergarten reading level to 4th grade reading level, and then we put him back in school. The challenge for us was with blended literacy specifically, that was the only lever that current school district could pull with how it was structured for our son. And what we learned is that he needed a completely different lever. And the way that it was working, we needed to be able to provide that ourselves. The other thing we really have to talk about, to be transparent, is COVID had an impact. And so we also have students that might have been on grade level, but due to how instruction happened or missing instruction or this or that, they've kind of moved past that phase of learning to read to reading to learn. And now they're in 5th, 6th, 7th grade, but they've kind of missed that window. And we're still trying to give them grade level content, but they haven't necessarily yet been identified on an IEP or 504 or something like that in order to get the proper accommodations that they would need to get caught up. So we look at, okay, this kid's not reading well. We're going to throw some intensive reading. We're going to throw some tutoring. We're going to throw this. Well, they might have already missed the boat on that, and we might have to pull some other levers for those students individually. And that comes back to, again, that each student, because it's completely possible that we're not going to have an a la carte approach that we can apply to every student that is in that situation. We can see similar symptoms. So if I have a cough, you can give me cough medicine or you can give me chemotherapy, depending on what's happening underneath. And when we look at each, we need to pop the hood, kick the tires, really see what's happening with each one of those students and what each student needs in order to get accelerated back on track. Absolutely.
Hi there, I'm Teresa DeWitt.
Hi.
I'm a parent in the district. I'm also a mental health professional. And so I've been excited at the prospect of talking to someone from Broward County. We have really been trying to educate our board and our community on the American Rescue Plan through the ESSER dollars, in specifically with the CASEL partnership with the social emotional learning programming. What our district has discovered is there's a lot of strings attached, unbeknown to our administration, and it's been kind of a whack-a-mole type situation. So with that background, I noticed that obviously with the data collection and also with you created a data analytics and predictive modeling pilot to identify at-risk students. So the data piece of that. With CASEL, they require their official data collecting program our partner is Panorama. We know that Panorama collects data more than they should, and then they upload that without the school's knowledge. I want to ask specifically on informed consent and pilot programs. What is your thoughts and would be your commitment to the district in terms of parents being involved with any type of pilot program, as well as would an informed consent be produced to every parent before that pilot would be conducted?
Okay, thank you for that. I'm organizing that question real quick. Okay, so ultimately, yes, I absolutely believe in informed consent, and I'll bring it through a different lens, if you will. So I'm an adjunct professor, a dissertation chair, and a doctoral mentor. So part of what I do is I take students through the process to become doctors in educational leadership. One of the challenges that we have is how we experiment on our kids. And we don't always recognize that that's what we're doing when we're experimenting on our kids. So I believe very heavily, not just in informed consent, but what needs to go through that internal review board process, whether we're doing it ourselves or there's outside people doing it. And a lot of times what will end up happening in school districts is the chief academic officer will say, I want to do this pilot. It doesn't run through the IRB process. It's not seen as research, but a pilot is research. And so whenever we're wanting to put students into a pilot program, you go through the same methodology that you would do for any other research project. So you identify who your sample is going to be. But if we identify a pilot as a research study, which is what it is, then we identify that our sample of individuals or our participants are at an age where informed parental consent is legally required. And that's a different lens, but I feel it's coming more and more into K-12 where that understanding is happening. So at one of my previous districts, I oversaw research, assessment, and accountability. And that was one of the things that we made sure that we did with our pilots is that we, not just the informed parental consent, but the full IRB process for those pilots, because that process to do it correctly and legally involves that informed parental consent. And that's what I would believe in, and that's what I would make sure we implemented as superintendent.
Hi, my name is Valerie Kammermeyer. I have 2 children in the district. I have an elementary student who's a struggling reader, was almost held back, and my middle school student is a gifted. My question for you, and you're a techie kind of guy, is about iReady. They spend a lot of time on iReady. Neither one of my kids like it, and I don't think they're benefiting from it. And I'm not a fan of kids sitting in front of a computer at school. They should be taught by teachers. What are your thoughts on iReady and other types of tech ed?
Sure, great question. So let me start with computer learning first, and then I'll reach the other part. So when we talk about instructional technologies, there's 3 ways that you can incorporate instructional technologies. You can learn about computers. So I think if we were all in that class playing Oregon Trail or Paint the Floor or something, we were learning about computers, how they work, what a mouse is, what a printer is. We can learn with computers, which means that the computer is there as a lever that's been pulled in order to help instruction. Or we can learn from computers, where the computer has really replaced the instructor in the classroom, if you will. iReady can be good or it can be bad. We used iReady in Kansas City Public Schools, for example. But the methodology behind iReady in Kansas City Public Schools is very different than how it's being used in some other districts. So in Kansas City Public Schools, when I got there, we didn't have set curriculum across the district. We didn't have set pacing guides or pacing across the districts, and there was no standardization about what was happening in the classroom whatsoever. We also had a 40% mobility rate with our students in and around the district. So for us, iReady was something that could provide consistency and ensure that if a student left this school and went to this school, they could pick right up on iReady where they were. And it could be a great thing for most kids in that situation for that. The challenge with iReady is twofold. One, iReady can absolutely be ineffective, especially with students that need additional accommodations. So it can be ineffective if you overuse it, if it becomes the instructor, if teachers are using iReady as extra planning time for them because the kids are on the computer. It can also be ineffective because the accommodations that are built in aren't what's actually required for students that need to make up reading gaps. So as an example, some of our students were actually switching over to a product called Amira. And Amira, it has AI built in. It works a little bit different where it actually watches the students as they read out loud. This is a reading accommodation type, a reading enhancement. And as they're reading out loud, it'll actually stop and it'll say, okay, let's try the word familiar again. And this is how it'll bring up a video and show how to say familiar, and it'll actually practice and help with the kid. So they're able to get kind of the same type of stuff that they're getting in iReady, but it's actually helpful. It's been Amira, A-M-I-R-A. And there's other tech tools out there like that. And then the second problem with iReady is it's not aligned to the FAST or necessarily to state of Florida standards. And so the reason that can become a challenge is we're teaching kids, let's say we're actually only doing the 20 minutes a day of iReady that we should be. The benchmarking of iReady isn't necessarily the same benchmarking that we're doing with FAST or with something else. So all of that was long, but what I would say to that as superintendent is I would go back to that philosophy of each student. So iReady can work for students, and maybe that hits a proficiency rate that we need for Tier 1 instruction, but it absolutely doesn't work for each student. And we need to make sure that we're finding those levers that we can pull for each student to make each student successful in the classroom.
Hello, my name is Medalia Glover, and I am a parent and a resident. I have 4 children, and 3 of which have graduated from Sarasota County Schools, and I have 1 student who is going to be a 10th grader. And the question that I'm going to ask you, which is the same as the other one. And first I wanted to thank you for your service as well.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate that. How are you going to support educators in Sarasota County around giving them what they need to be able to implement any changes that you feel might be needed, especially around history, making sure that the history that they are teaching the students is actually factual and inclusive? What kind of support can you offer those educators?
Okay. So I think there's a couple of things to that. One is, as a cabinet member in a school district and the husband of an educator, I understand the concept of one more thing. And we one more thing our teachers a lot. That is why my wife is on sabbatical writing a novel right now instead of teaching in a classroom. So that's the very first thing that I would put in place, is making sure that we don't just one more thing our teachers, that the initiatives that we're putting in place are very, very wise and smart. And I do things a little bit differently. So when we talk about strategic plan, a lot of times those get built and they're put on the shelf, and we kind of refer back when it's budget time. Or somebody wants to buy something, they say what objective on the strategic plan it aligns to. I do strategic planning a little bit different. So we have the strategic plan, it has real goals, and then we operationalize that strategic plan. And so we create the comprehensive school improvement plan at the district level, and then every department and every school creates their DIP or their SIP, so department improvement plan or a school improvement plan. And that's an annual plan, and if it's not on the plan, we're not going to one more thing unless we really, really have to. But through that planning process, what I've learned is we can start to eliminate a lot of one more things. We can also start to see emerging themes come out of the data from those plans as they all start to roll back up. We evaluate them at the district level and say, yes, this makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense. We can start to see themes and say, oh, we need to allocate resources differently in order to make sure our teachers have what they need. In terms of in terms of the history, it's going to be that's a challenging one. I'll just be upfront and honest. So things mean different things to different people, and I think that we all know that here in Sarasota County Schools. And we will see where, take AP African American history, for example. I'm just gonna talk about it.
Thank you.
So we have on one side of that discussion the conversation about what was the true history of African American history, and then we have the other side of the discussion, which is the embedding of CRT and that other kinds of thing inside of AP African American history, and what should have been a pretty straightforward curriculum teaching the history of African Americans in the United States. It turns into a political divisive issue. I'll be forthright and say I will always follow state statute, and I will always follow the law, executive orders, and all of that. But I also understand that there's a need to teach the realities of history, but there's also a need to do it in a way that's not interfering with the parental rights. And I know that that's a buzzword, but when I talk about parental rights, I'm talking about the partnership that we have as educators with parents. So a little bit about my background is I grew up extremely poor. Both of my parents struggled with addiction, and my dad passed away from his struggle in 2012. I didn't know where my next meal was coming from. I didn't know where my winter coat was coming from. I did not know what was going to happen the next day. I surely wasn't doing homework when, I grew. If you're familiar with Kansas City, I grew up downtown east of Truce. That is not a safe place at all. So when I was growing up at night, it was, can I get home safe? Do I have food? And can I keep my little brother alive and get him to school tomorrow? There was months at a time I didn't know where my mom was. In my situation, the school needed to step in, and my teachers made sure that I had food. It was my teachers who made sure I had a winter coat, which is not a thing in Florida, but I needed it there. And it was my teachers who kind of stepped in. But there's the other side of that, where I've been married 21 years and I'm the father of 5 sons. And as a parent, I provide for my 5 sons. My sons, I give them their winter coat. I make sure that they're fed, and I make sure that we're doing all that. And so when we look at the partnership between educators and parents, yes, there's times that we need to work with community partners, or we need to apply different accommodations for different students, but we also need to be cognizant of parents that are already providing what their students need and have, and the how also matters. And so, parents are making sure that their students are life ready. They're instilling morals and values and importance into their children, and we need to make sure that we're allowing parents to do that from home. And so there's the what, which is what we want to teach or what we think is important. And then there's the how. And when we think about things like AP African American history, it shouldn't be, the how part shouldn't be controversial. And I think there's a way to move forward with teaching really good African American history while also not infringing on the value systems and that kind of thing that's happening in the home.
I want to say thank you for being the only candidate that directly answered my question. I do appreciate your honesty.
Sure, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Elvira Kulik. I'm a chiropractor. I'm also a parent of a rising senior. We have been part of the Sarasota County School District for the last 11 years. We have a very diverse student body. I would like to know how you will protect all of the students.
Is it okay if I ask kind of the context of protect?
In every diverse aspect.
Okay. So I'll start with safety and security, and then I'll move into kind of the safe environment of school. So when we talk about safety and security, one of the first things I would want to do as superintendent is move the chief of police under the superintendent for various reasons. One of those is if there's an event that is occurring or something like that, we need to make sure that we have adequate and unfiltered communication directly to me so that I know what would be going on the ground and that type of thing. I also feel that with safety and security, there's some things that we can do. So in Broward County, for example, we've gone to the single point of entry. We've gone to some really, I have to be careful what I say in public about safety and security. So we've gone to some very innovative things that we have been able to do on the back end when it comes to safety and security. And we've been able to leverage our guardians and our school resource officers and make sure that we get an adequate safety and security plan out there and balance safety and security and instruction. When we talk about safe environment, for me, it really comes down to this. It's everybody deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And the environment, I think, first, if we start with a culture of excellence and we want academic excellence and a hook and a plan for each of our students, and then we're also ensuring that everybody's treated with dignity and respect, I think that the school becomes a place that can feel safe for everyone, but that is also safe for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Yes, and thank you for your service, and thank you for the wisdom you've already shown us in that you listened to your wife.
Absolutely.
I'll be 50 years married next month, and that's how I've gotten there. So I have a passion for not only thinking in terms of going on to college, but looking at vocational, technical training, that maybe apprenticeship type programs that help kids get ready for a career, which in today's market can be extremely positive, extremely lucrative. So have you had experience with that? I'd be interested in your thoughts on those types of programs.
Sure, absolutely. So, and thank you for bringing that up. I think it's very important. We have 2 adult children right now. Both are being pretty successful. Neither has gone to college yet. So one is right now in the academy to be a corrections officer for the state of New York. That's the path that worked for him. That was his hook and his path. And then the other got into IT, and he has made it his life's goal to get more certifications than I did and faster than I did in IT. And he has done it. So he is right now a systems administrator for a company in Kansas City, and he's about to start college. But the way he's doing it is he's knocked out enough certifications that he's knocked out about half his degree that he's going to end up getting. When I talk about a hook and a plan, I talk about that plan for post-secondary options. My way forward in life, my plan was the military. There was not a hope or a prayer for me graduating high school that I was going to go straight into college. I had no way to pay for it, and I barely made it out of high school, barely. So I understand fully the military option. I understand college, and I understand the different avenues that are available, apprenticeships and that kind of thing. With that, when we talk about the plans for our students, it has to be all-encompassing. None of those pathways that we just discussed are more important than the other because they all apply to students differently. And so one of the things we did in Volusia County when I was there is we set up HVAC Academy for our students to be able to go through and get the HVAC certification. I helped with a couple of other school districts across the country set up esports, to set up project-based learning, IT certifications, so cybersecurity, and different things like that. In Broward, we have really picked up CTE and understand. We want to make sure that everybody can either graduate with advanced placement credit, certification from industry, IB, ACE, or something like that, some sort of accelerator for each student, and making sure that we have those pathways built out. But the most important thing isn't just the building out of the pathways, it's getting with each student so they understand the pathways and which one they think works for them. So we can have students like my son that think or thought that college was the path for him, and now he's looking at a certification route or an apprenticeship. Another program that we set up in Kansas City was called Northland Career Center. And with that program, we set it up so that students could come in, work or go to school a half day, and then it was the first 6 weeks they went off site and they got instruction, but then the rest of the year they went to an internship for the rest of that year. And then we worked out some other things. One was called Summit Academy, where we were able to actually accelerate some of our students to when they graduated high school through a very similar thing. They got apprenticeships, and when they graduated high school, they also had their associate's degree. And then they were either able to go on to college or directly into the workforce. So there's a lot of different pathways that we can explore and make sure that we implement. The important part is that we explore and we implement them, and then we assure that we have alignment with our students with that hook and a plan for which pathway is best for them. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Phillips.
Hey, good afternoon.
My name is Chris Morales. I'm the Deputy Chief of Police for the City of Northport. I'm homegrown here. I grew up through the school board system here. I have two boys. One's a sophomore at Northport High. One's a fifth grader at Toledo Bay Elementary. My wife's also a school counselor in the school board system. And thank you for your service as well. So my question to you is, as a Chief Information Officer, tell us a time when you had to make an unpopular decision. How did you deliver that, and what was the outcome?
Sure. The most unpopular decision I've ever implemented as Chief Information Officer is turning on what's called multi-factor authentication. So if you're familiar, you try to go onto your bank's website and then it comes to your phone.
Oh, yeah.
We know a lot about it. So it just has that other way of making sure it's secure. Turning on multi-factor authentication, it sounds kind of like, oh, no big deal. Massive union pushback. Massive employees not wanting to use their device for an employee function or employment function, or the employer compelling them to use that device. So the first thing I did was listen. I believe very strongly in what I call the feedback pushback continuum. So feedback is where people are telling you, hey, the plan kind of makes sense, but I have these concerns. Pushback is your plan makes no sense, and I'm going to fight against you the entire time you're trying to implement it. And then there's a continuum. So the first thing I do is I listen, especially if it starts on the pushback side. And I really listen. I listen to understand. And what I was getting back from the teachers at that time was they really did not trust the district. And they thought the district was going to leverage that to be able to see the content on their phones. They also thought that if they used their personal phone for that business reason, everything on their phone would be available under Sunshine. And so when I listened to that, I had to then go do research because this was right when I moved to Florida, and Florida Sunshine is different than Missouri Sunshine. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't wrong. And I went and looked and found out it wasn't really a Sunshine issue just for multi-factor authentication. But then I came up with a solution. The solution was, if you're absolutely not comfortable, let me give you all the information. I looked at Sunshine Law. I've gotten with legal. Here's everything that I can tell you. And I do encourage you to use your phone. But if you don't want to, here's a little dongle that you can carry with you. And you can carry this dongle around. And if that's or how you'd rather do it. By the start of that project, we had over 1,500 teachers that absolutely refused to use their phones for multi-factor authentication. By the end of the project, we had given out 14 dongles, and the rest of the teachers had decided to use their phone. So, and I apply that methodology to basically anything. I try to stay objective. I look at the data. I listen to understand, and then I look for a pathway forward. And I try to turn that pushback into feedback to a way that we can agree and move forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Phillips, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Thank you for your military service as
Thank
well. We sincerely appreciate that. As somebody who supervises 16 IT people, I can't believe you supervise 500 IT people, because definitely a different workforce for sure. I was going to ask you. Yeah. Well, I'm a little techie, but that authentication. I'm waiting until you make all 10 of my fingerprints be part of the authentication process. But I wanted to ask you a question, but you kind of answered it in Deputy Chief Morales, is how you push something down and how you communicate change within the organization. And with 30,000 people, that's difficult sometimes to get that thing turned around. But you answered that pretty well. I wanted to ask you, since you are in Broward County, and obviously that is the site of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and everything that went on there. What, from a technology standpoint, and I understand you might not be able to tell us everything that you're doing over there, but what were the lessons learned from that as it applied to your particular field that you might be able to bring here? And the reason I say that is we're certainly not as large as Broward, but we all collectively, law enforcement agencies, really have a vested interest in protecting our kids. The thing that keeps us up at night is Inglewood Elementary is all the way down there, and the school's all the way on the north end. You can't be everywhere all the time. So how can technology be leveraged to keep our kids safe?
Absolutely. If you're okay, I'll speak in generality so I can go a little bit further into detail. So one of the very first things to understand is limited resources. So, whether it's physical security or whether it's IT security, they have to get through one time. We got to be right every time. We have to stop everything. They only got to get through one time. So it's understanding that approach when it comes to safety and security, whether it's IT security or physical security, as you're talking about. Some of the things that we've been able to do and leverage in different districts that I've been in is really leveraging what's called interoperability when it comes to the technology side of things. So if you're not familiar with interoperability, it's a fancy word to say your systems work together. And so when I've gotten to some districts, the camera system doesn't talk with the incident management system. It doesn't talk with the single point of entry system. It doesn't interact with the intercom system or the fire alarms or the badging system. And so anytime anything's going on with one of those systems, or there's an alert here or a false alarm here, we're chasing our tails and having issues. So one of the things I'm a big believer in is making sure we get those systems talking, but we also have to have somebody monitoring and listening. So I believe very strongly in a district security operations center and making sure that we have a real person 24/7 monitoring everything so that we can't actually I prefer more persons than one, but we need to operate in a way that we can apply resources to where they are needed most. One of the other things that I found is, as you said, you supervise 16 IT people. I've gotten into districts where the chief of police or chief of safety and security also has to supervise IT people. What I've done in every district I've gone to is say, do you really want to supervise IT people? If not, I will take them. I have a criminal justice bachelor's. I have a master's in business and organizational security management. I feel like I can help you with the security stuff more than you can help me with the IT stuff. And so I've taken on those IT folks, and I've made sure that we've had a dedicated safety tech team in the district that can make sure that all of those technology pieces are working. And then once we have interoperability, we're able to leverage some really cool stuff. So as an example, looking at programs that can have AI applied to our cameras and do notifications for AI weapons detection, for example. So see a very small nomenclature of a weapon or piece of a nomenclature of a weapon and be able to alert. But with interoperability, not only do we get an alert, but we were able to talk to our Alyssa's alert company as well as our intercom company, and we can put the school on lockdown automatically while someone's still in the parking lot. So I'll just say Zero Eyes as an example of a company that can do that. It can send the alerts and we can send those automated triggers down. The school can be put on lockdown. There's human intervention to make sure that, it needs to be a lockdown, but it's really quick. It's 7 seconds. And that's just one of the things that we can do when we start to leverage technology in with security operations.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Sarasota County Sheriff Kurt Honkman. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Nice to meet you.
Hello, Dr. Phillips.
Hello.
Thanks for taking the time and thank you for your service. Question for you, because you look at the other candidates and in some form or another, you've got an interim superintendent, which is what we have now. As you know, you have a deputy one that's out of Hillsborough, and then you have an old superintendent from Clay County. So how do you think your skill set as a chief information officer translates into being able to be a superintendent of school?
Absolutely great question and fair question. So for me, it's understanding the difference between an IT director and a chief information officer. So you can look at my background and you can see the leadership is there. And I was able to take that leadership and throughout getting the instructional pieces through the doctorate program and through being adjunct professor, I was able to pick up on the instructional side as well. But as a CIO, I'm able to apply the instructional side and the instructional leadership. And one of I think the most important things to understand as CIO, I am in every strategy meeting, regardless of what it is, whether it's instructional or operational. I'm in every piece of innovation for the district. I'm looking at educational data in one meeting, going right over to a safety and security meeting, going right over to a physical or a PPO, physical plant operations meeting, going right into innovative learning. So I sit in the only seat right now in Broward County and other districts that I've been a CIO where I see the same perspective as the superintendent. So you can have a deputy superintendent of operations, or you can have a deputy superintendent of instruction, or you can have some of these other folks. But education and school districts are an ecosystem, and instruction and operations don't operate independently of each other. And so what I am and where I'm different than maybe some of the other candidates is I'm not an instructional leader and I'm not an operational leader. I'm an educational leader. My experience is in bringing those things together and building the bridges, looking for the ways that we can be an ecosystem and move forward together so that we can make amazing academic gains, but we can also find efficiencies and become more effective on the operational side so that we can shift that back to instruction. I can talk all day long about the instructional side of the house. If we want to talk about the bottom quartile, if we want to talk about how we need more pre-K expansion in order to get third grade reading back on track, if we want to talk about graduation rates, anything we want to talk about MTSS, response to intervention, not just talk it, but I've done it. I've rolled up my sleeves. I've been there. I've done the walkthroughs with the chief academic officer, with the superintendent. We've come back, we've collected the data, we've come up with what are we going to do next and how are we going to apply it. And what I've been able to bring to the instructional side is the ability to operationalize the plans or turn the dreaming into achieving. So a lot of times the struggle with instructional leaders, especially those that I have as candidates under me, is making that jump from instructional leader to educational leader and understanding okay, we're not just doing teaching and learning more. We have a whole entire school district that we have to lead, and we have to understand how all the pieces work together. And that's what my experience is, and that's what I bring to the table.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good afternoon, Dr. Phillips, Paul Caragiolo. I'm a district parent. Got 3 or 4 questions that are in my head, but I'm just going to ask you a very basic one. Can a school district be too large?
Just in general size?
Yep.
That's a really good question. So
What's your answer?
Only kind the only kind Paul asked.
Well, I'm kind of cheating a little bit because because it's a simple one, I'm going to, not simple, but since it's a brief one, I have follow-up to it.
Okay. I think that a school district can be too large to be effective, especially effective in its core mission, and especially effective if the size of the district doesn't come along with adequate resources to implement appropriately in a district that size. So there's pluses and minuses. So let's take a population of 100,000 students, and let's just say we're going to break that up into 4 school districts. That's now 4 superintendents. That's 4 everything. And now you've lost some efficiency there. But the question is, have you gained effectiveness? And the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, I just use a simple metaphor. Efficiency is if I put something at the end of a swimming pool and you try to swim to it, I can teach you how to do a better stroke. I can teach you how to kick better. You can get there much, much faster and be the best swimmer in the world now. Effectiveness is I can just walk down the side of the pool. Oh. Effectiveness is I can walk down to the side of the pool and I can get there in half the time, no matter how fast you can swim. And so that's the real question. It's less efficient for smaller districts, but it might be more effective, and then vice versa for larger districts.
I appreciate that. And that being said, hypothetical, tomorrow you're informed that within, say, 7 days, you were going to receive an influx of 500 to 600 students based on some circumstance that just occurred. What's the first thing?
First, I'll have a lot of questions.
What's your first question?
My first question is, are they all, where are they going? And is that a question for me, or is that like who answers the question would be question number 2?
I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, like, most of the things, I'm interested in what happens when it's not normal, when you have exigencies, when you have things that come up, because that's what drives consistency in people's lives. That those expectations are important for working people. When things get turned upside down, we see what happens. So for me, I'm just trying to gauge how you process and how you deal with actionable information.
Okay, gotcha. So first, I'm going to digest the information and understand it. So if you say 500 students, I'm going to try to break those students down by category. So are they all in the same grade, or the various grades? Are they all going to the same sites, different sites, and that kind of thing? Second thing I'm going to do is, once I have that figured out, it's resource allocation time. So it's what resources do we have available? Where do we need extra resources? Do we have empty seats already where they're going and we don't actually need additional resources because we're already over strength there? So really figuring out the resource allocation. And then I'm going to get down to additional support. So you might have the regular resource allocation. So maybe we need additional teachers. Maybe we need another administrator on campus if we have a ratio for assistant principals or something on campus. Maybe we need more food service people, bus routing, that kind of thing. So we'll get to resources and logistics, but then there's more questions to ask. So are they ESOL students? Do they need additional type of things like that? So are they all coming from, Guatemala, and they need some cultural help as well? Do they have lodging? Do they have those things? If not, what community partners can we get with to make sure that all of that's taken care of? So I would take all of that as rapidly as possible and just come up with a project plan of how we are going to get the students situated and into the process as seamlessly as possible.
Well, I appreciate your attention is directly on the students, and that's.
Hi, I'm Eric Robinson, and thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you.
I have a little bit of long-winded question. I'm going to build on Keith Mercier's question. We had a point in time where we got rid of our communications department and we subcontracted them out. And then we got a time where we got rid of the people we subbed out, so we had no communications department.
And so we had to find somebody to be the face of communication, somebody who was good in front of people. And they chose the CIO, which you would think would be the guy who's, you know, in the closet, but he did a good job. I mean, he's a very good looking guy too, but he did a wonderful job. His wife's a teacher. So I understand where he and CIO can be diverse and do things outside their comfort zone. That was definitely outside of his comfort zone. You would have known that. Yeah, he did a good job. But having somebody who's not been in the classroom, because our core function here is, at the end of the day, we have all this landing, we have all the support, but at the end of the day, most of it is one person standing in front of a room of 20 students. And everybody exists outside in support of that one person standing in front of the room. That's what we all exist for. And so help me to understand your role, because you haven't been that person. And we have one of the biggest dichotomies, I'm sure it's at Broward too, is administration thinks one way, school district thinks another way. And so having somebody from the superintendent who's been at the district level and been that one person in front of 20 people needing support is very helpful. So help me understand, since you haven't been in that position in the classroom, I'm sure you're great in the administration, could be and handle all the different roles, but how can you handle that role of supporting that one person who's in front of those 20 people? Because at the end of the day, that's what your job is.
Sure.
You understand my question?
I understand your question. I think it's a fair question. So the best way that I can put it is there's pluses and minuses when someone's been in the classroom. Well, first I just want to say I've been in the classroom, just not the K through 12 classroom. So teaching college. So I say that only to say that I understand what it takes to be an educator. Educating K through 12 or pre-K through 12 kids is different, but I do understand what it takes to be in the classroom. But I've also seen a couple of things when a person does come up through what would be the traditional route. One is old habits, confirmation bias, not listening to the teachers that are in the classroom because they have their own experiences that I feel that they might feel have more merit than the teachers that are in the classroom. Not believing that certain teachers need additional resources, maybe they're not trying as hard, or if they've come up through the school administrator route, they believe or support the administrators more than the teachers in the classroom because they spent most of their time as an administrator. Maybe they only had 5 years in the classroom and then 10 as an administrator. So I see it from both sides. And what I'll say is I've been very successful in supporting the teachers in the classroom. So while I haven't been that sage on the stage, if you will, I've had instructional technology under me. I've had assistive technology under me. I've had library media under me. And we've been able to do some really great things. One of the great things about having instructional technology under me is going in and partnering with those teachers, seeing exactly what it is that they're doing, but most importantly, what they're struggling with. What's the one more thing that they're having to do? Teachers are very well trained in how to deliver instruction to students. But I don't know that any teacher preparation program in the country is very good at actually teaching teachers how to be teachers. There's a lot of OJT that happens once they arrive. And so one of the things that I've been able to do is come in with a different perspective and understand what their job is and what they're trying to deliver, but then also listen and come up with solutions that can actually help them be more effective in the classroom. So I can answer that question from the lens of, as an educational leader, I know what levers to pull and what things to do to help teachers in the classroom. I'm not going to be able to answer the question from the same perspective as somebody that's come up through the traditional route, because I haven't been a K through 12 teacher. So I know when I'm doing things wrong, though, because my wife will yell at me. She is a teacher. But yeah, I mean, there's truth to what you're saying. But I just also feel like there's another side to it. At the end of the day, for me, leadership is leadership. And the superintendent, whether they came up through a non-traditional path or an instructional path, the truth is superintendent doesn't get to do a lot of instructional leadership. they have to rely on their CAOs, their assistant and regional superintendents, their executive directors of instruction, their principals, and the different folks that are making sure that the teaching and learning is happening. Superintendent needs to know when those things aren't working well and what to do about it, and that I believe that I can bring to the table.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Katrina Ward, and I'm a retired educator from Sarasota County Schools, 32 and a half years. I had the pleasure of being a classroom teacher, a school guidance counselor, guidance department chair, and then I moved to the district and became a counselor trainer, K-12, and ended my career as the supervisor in charge of the school choice department. This is a fabulous district, fabulous, and I love it. I love Sarasota County Schools. Thank you. Sarasota County is an A district, and of course, that's based on the state's accountability system. However, in my 32 years with the district, I have seen the same schools continuously perform below proficiency levels. That's very concerning. I love the fact that you have that technology background. I think that's wonderful. So I'm going to ask if you can share a research-based, out-of-the-box kind of a program or strategies that could possibly be used to address deficiencies in reading and or math. You can choose one, you can tell me about both, but I'm very curious.
Okay, I'm going to go out of the box.
Perfect.
All right.
Love it.
So I'm going to tell you what we did in Kansas City Public Schools,
Mhm.
because if you look up Kansas City Public Schools, you're going to see a few things. One, the entire district is free lunch, not free and reduced, free, all below the poverty line. It's a minority majority district, and it's where I grew up. It was home for me. We saw in the literature that if you take care of some of these Maslow's hierarchy kind of needs, that students are going to be able to focus more motivation for learning, more self-efficacy, and that kind of thing. One of the things we saw was that feeding them breakfast might get us some better results. So we fed them breakfast, and our scores went down. And we found out our scores went down not because of the what, but because of the how. So we were feeding them breakfast, but the idea that came out of the teaching and learning side is we'll just put them through the regular breakfast line. Well, the problem with that was we started losing seat time. It was taking so long to get our students through the breakfast line that we lost seat time, and especially that early morning seat time before kids start to really lose the energy and the focus. The teaching and learning staff wanted to give up on it and just kind of go back. But I looked at it through a different lens. And I said, okay, well, the research is the research, and the research is showing if we feed our kids breakfast, they're going to perform better. I don't think it's the what, I think it's the how. And so what we were able to come up with is I brought in the director of food service, the director of transportation, and the director of custodial. And what we came up with after looking at some more literature was breakfast in the classroom. It took a little bit more resources. We had to work on routing some of our students a little bit differently. We had to get food service staff there earlier so that we could get breakfast in the classroom. And then we had to get our custodial staff to go and clean up so we didn't have trash inside the classroom all day. So we were able to apply breakfast in the classroom in a different way. Through that, we also ended up getting new transportation routing software, which that was a byproduct, but did amazing things as well. But then we were able to start to see the positive results. And that was just one program that we implemented. But over my first 18 months at Kansas City Public Schools, we were able to get the highest scores that the district had gotten in over 30 years. And we scored high enough for state accreditation for the first time in over 2 decades. We didn't get state accreditation because in Missouri, you have to have 3 consecutive years of gains and that kind of thing. But by the time I left Kansas City Public Schools, we were state accredited and we were able to. So that was just one example.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, Dr. Phillips. I'm Dr. Gary Kupatagris. I'm a resident for 40 years in Florida, in Sarasota. I have 6 children, 2 of them have autism. So I know your struggles. So my question is, I've got a lot of different businesses, and You're right about one thing. The first guy I always ask is the IT guy to come in the room to go help solve the problems. Because without communication and technology, you got nothing. You'd be really spinning your wheels, okay? In order to fix Sarasota's problems, they need a lot of talent, not just one person. I mean, you can, like I said, you seem to be well versed. A lot of these people, when I look at these resumes, they're very qualified. They don't stay too long anywhere. I mean, it's 2 years and 2 years and 2 years and 2 years. And same with yours, but basically you've been in the same field forever with this information technology, and I like what you said. And I gave the same question to the gentleman before you. If you didn't get this job as, which I don't know if I'd want it, as superintendent to get fired at, your talents would be well served here. And would you entertain if they revamped the whole system and had like they broke a different way where you would be in charge of, let's just say assistant superintendent or somehow because not everybody can do one thing. Everybody's got skills and it takes a team. And I guess this would be the superintendent, whoever gets chosen, they'd give him the authority to go out and find people. But I mean, this recruiting company did a very good job in bringing some really good quality candidates. And just I asked them, why let these guys go? You've already spent all this money.
Sure.
Would you be entertained being like a second in command or something in that regard and tell who guys is first? Yeah, you got to take him with if you want the job. Would something like that be interesting to you, or do you keep an open mind towards that, or no?
That is a very interesting question.
I try.
So here's how I'll answer that question. I would absolutely entertain it, and here's why. For me, applying for superintendent at Sarasota County Schools is not about being a superintendent. I've not applied for any other districts. I've not applied to be a superintendent. Superintendent's not on my bucket list, if I'm being completely honest with everybody. What I see in Sarasota County Schools is a leadership deficit. And that's why I think that I can step in and be a great leader for Sarasota County Schools. To ask if I need that superintendent chair, the answer is no, with a but. The but is, if that leader, say it's not me that's selected as superintendent, if I can align with the vision of whoever's selected, and I can see my role in that vision of moving the district forward, I would absolutely consider a different seat on the bus with Sarasota County Schools. Because for me, when I look at the district, what I see is, I'm going to be fully transparent. I see a tale of two districts. I see the one that's in the marketing. I see the one that says how great the district is, but then I see the scores. I see the data. I see what hasn't moved in 7 years. I see what is moving backwards or staying stagnant. And that is a very different district than the one that's in the marketing and what's attracting folks to the district and that kind of thing. So the work that I want to do with Sarasota County Schools is really simple. I just want it to be one district instead of a tale of two districts. If that's in the CEO superintendent chair, great, but I still believe in that mission. And if the person who's selected has that same vision and there's a way that I can help with that, I'm more than happy to.
Joe, we have a question from a gentleman who's in with Zoom.
Good afternoon. My apologies, Dr. Phillips. I can't be there in person. Thank you for your service, brothers. Been in the Army, his career as well, so appreciate your sacrifice, also your life story that I'm sure, maybe going back to Mr. Robinson's question, I think one of the best ways we teach our youth is through modeling, and your own life story sounds really an incredible life story, and commend you on that and your where you are right now with us this afternoon. So I'll try to be brief and maybe just give you another hypothetical question for you sitting as superintendent of Sarasota County School District, and 6 months into your job, you find out you have a cabinet member that is not an effective self-starting leader that you need as part of your executive team, and you have principals complaining about the individual. But you discover that individual is friends with a few of the members of this of your elected school board, and was wondering, how would you navigate that situation, and what does accountability look like under your administration? And then also maybe how do you develop your immediate executive team, and what does that orientation look like?
All right, thank you. I'll try to try to talk to everybody all at once. So.
Don't worry. Give me your back. I've had it all the whole time, and you should be the president there. Yeah.
All right. I'll maybe give you. Okay. So I'm going to answer it kind of backwards, which is, what does accountability look like under my leadership? For me, accountability is real, and it's not something that just ends up in somebody's evaluation at the end of the year. So for me, I believe very, very strongly in clear expectations. I do what I call expectation documents. And expectation documents cover everything from performance to behavior, especially as a leader. So that happens with all of my direct reports, and my expectation is that it happens with their direct reports as well. The other piece of, after the expectations, is consequences. And that's a piece that I feel is missing when it comes to educational leadership, is those consequences. So we can throw some random expectations out there, like we want to move this by 5% or move this, but my expectations are leadership driven, data driven, which I know is a buzzword, but real data, and then performance and behavioral based. And then when I have my one-on-ones with each of my leaders, the expectation document comes out every single time, and we go over the strategic plan, what their dip or sip is, and then the expectations document. And they're either doing a great job or they're not. And we're going to talk about it openly. I believe firmly in the first time you find out you're not doing a great job shouldn't be when it's evaluation time. It should be when you're not doing a great job. The second part of that is the relationship. So I'll call it back channels and that kind of thing. I can be, I'm just going to say I'm kind of a scary guy as a leader for one reason. I don't do deals, and I'm too big to fit in anybody's pocket. I do not care what relationship somebody has with a board member. I simply don't care. And I don't care if that gets me fired. I'm going to be fully honest. If I get fired because I did the right thing and somebody leveraged a relationship, then that's what was meant to be for me, and I'll be just fine. What I'm not going to do is serve up my integrity because of a relationship. And I just said that same thing to the board in the interview. I don't know if that meant I'm not going to get it, but I just said the same thing. I just don't do that, because you can't move the needle when that's how you operate. If you operate off of these back channel relationships, and I've seen it, I've seen the deals, I've seen the pockets. I've had superintendents that made so many deals they crossed over each other, and they couldn't make anybody happy because somebody made a deal with this person and that's against the deal and what they made with that person, and it doesn't work. And it at no point is it what's best for students and their achievement. So that's just not how I operate. So if I'm selected as a superintendent, we'll have clear expectations. The other thing that I have is clear administrative norms. They're in the 90-day transition, or my 90-day accounting transition plan, which is now on the website. But there's clear administrative norms. That's how we behave, it's how we treat each other, and it's how we operate. And as superintendent, if you want to go around me and leverage that relationship, you can do that. But then we're going to have a talk. And it's not going to be a comfortable talk. The other thing that I have is an analogy that I call rocks and balloons. And I put out my rocks and balloons analogy when I start every time. And here's how this analogy is. If you think about a bouquet of birthday balloons, they are all pulling in the same direction. They all look different. They're all pretty. They're all pulling in the same direction. You can have one rock that's holding all those balloons down. You can have some deflated balloons. While they're not holding those balloons down, they're certainly not helping go in the direction of the rest of the balloons. And so once we have the vision, that purpose, that direction, and that motivation, it's rocks and balloons time. And I categorize everything according to rocks and balloons. So if you're a balloon and you're helping us get to where we're going, that is fantastic. If you're a deflated balloon, okay, we'll talk about that. Deflated balloons need to be inflated. They might need training. They might need support. They might need to be listened to. They might not know what they're supposed to be doing at work every day. So we'll have those conversations of how we can inflate those balloons. The tough part with people is it's hard to tell from looking at a person if they're a rock or a balloon. So what I do is I put helium in them no matter what. But if you put helium in a rock, they will not inflate. And after I put helium in a rock and they don't inflate, it's time to talk about rocks and balloons. And I know it's silly. I know it's silly, but when a Rocks and Balloons meeting pops up on your agenda, it's a very serious conversation. So with that, I hope that I answered your question.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you like to make one final summary statement?
Sure. So again, I just want to thank everybody for participating in this process. And you know, I'll talk about the elephant in the room again. I'm not an instructional leader. I didn't come up through the normal path. I'm a non-traditional educational leader. But I have shown that I believe have shown that my track record is solid. I'm able to achieve things for the betterment of students. I'm able to get everybody on the team rowing in the same direction. And I'm a firm believer in being authentic and transparent in my leadership. So with that, whether I'm your candidate or not, I just want to say thank you again. It's been an amazing time to come to Sarasota County Schools. I really, really like it here. Not just because my wife told me to, but I really do. And I hope that if I am the candidate, I can speak with all of you as I would come in during that 90-day transition plan, but beyond, because I think that everybody in this room has a very important perspective that the superintendent, whoever that is coming in, needs to know. And hey, I might not agree with your perspective, but I'm going to listen to it, and I'm going to listen to understand it, and I'm going to make sure that it's being incorporated in my decision-making process. So with that, I'll just say thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.